Welcome back to Mindful Serenity Yoga, or Waking Up in a Busy World. We're going to continue with the answering of questions. Now, I had already previously started this video, but the phone rang while I was answering a question, so I'm going to start with the same question and try answering it again. And the question was, how do you neutralize past karma, make up for sins before we die? How do we neutralize past karma or make up for sins before we die? I have started the timer already. I'm going to take a deep breath. Now, that's a great question and a very challenging question to answer, especially for someone who knows as little as I do. So again, I'm going to ask you not to take anything I have to say too lightly. I want you to investigate within yourself what the answer might be, or investigate with the experts that are out there. True knowledge, however, as we know, is gained from inner reflection more so than anything else. There's three words in this that ring in my mind as I read the question, and that is number one, neutralize, karma, and sin. So those are three definitions we probably have to be a little bit more aware of the meaning of before we begin with the answering of this question. So let's start with the big one, karma. And we all have an idea, I suppose, of what karma is. We think of it maybe as the Eastern viewpoint of how the universe will pay us back for anything we do wrong. If we hurt somebody, the universe is going to make us pay for it, a vengeance of the universe. But karma is much more than that, and it's much less than that. It's just, first of all, a word, like all words, and because every word has several different connotations and interpretations to it, I don't want you to get hung up on the word karma. Basically, all it means is that with every action, there's going to be a reaction, and that is just the law of nature, not just the law of some Eastern religion. It is the law of nature. For everything that happens, there will be a reaction. If the skies suddenly break down into a storm, we're going to see a reaction on the earth. We're going to see trees knocked over. We're going to see, soil swept away or whatever, or flooding. That is just a natural reaction to an action. So in speaking about humanity and the human being, we have to be aware that there's only three things that we truly own and cling to, or own, and that will continue on after we are gone, that could represent karma. Now, karma is also, in some Eastern religions, referred to what will happen in the life after this, right? So I don't want to get hung up on that too much right now, but you will hear that as well. That karma is, say, for example, in this lifetime, you don't strive to meet your goal, or you hurt somebody. You may be reborn into another incarnation that is going to have to learn that lesson again, and may have to seemingly suffer, as if it's like a payment back from the universe for something you've done wrong. But that's not what it is. It's not about right or wrong, good or bad, and we'll talk about sin in a minute. Karma is just reaction to action. So getting back to this lifetime and this incarnation, what happens in karma is we are only responsible for three things in this world, okay? Three things we have control over. Three things that may have a karmic outflow where we are the center of it. And that is our actions, our thinking, and our words. So those are the only things we can leave behind, the only things that we have a karmic influence on. So my actions may cause a ripple effect, and I have to be aware of that before I act, so that I choose to act wholesome and skillfully rather than unskillfully, unconsciously, and unwholesomely. So my action, for example, if I feel someone has offended me and my desire is to go up and punch them in the gut, there's going to be a consequence. If I follow through on that action, I had the thought of anger, had the thought of vengeance, and I'm going to go follow through with an action and maybe some harsh words. I have to realize that the thought, the action, and the harsh words used in my retaliation against what this person has done are going to have an effect. They're going to, a direct effect on the person I am punching and screaming at and thinking poorly of, as well as myself. And it can even extend beyond there to a more collective ripple effect that can go on from weeks to decades to years. You know, we're talking about grudges and feuds. So what I choose to do will have an effect, a consequence. I go over and I punch this person in the gut, and I yell at them and call them every name in the book. And my head is full of thoughts of anger and vengeance and how dare they, and judgment and misconstrued perceptions about the situation. I am harming myself because I'm holding on to emotions and feeding the fire of anger rather than feeding the fire of compassion and forgiveness and kindness, which can have a terrible effect on me physically. Holding on to anger has been known to cause odd types of physiological reactions in the body. Also, the person is going to have a physical reaction once I punch them in the gut. It's going to hurt. I'm hurting the body of another individual. I'm hurting the feelings and thoughts of another individual by calling them names. And if they identify themselves as who I say they are going to internalize my emotions that I'm projecting out onto them. And they are going to develop issues with worthlessness or deservedness, or they too may get angry and punch me back, right? So then they have all that anger and resentment inside of them, all those ill thoughts. The words themselves, if they are not truthful and or are harsh, can cause even more effects than the punch in the gut can. And we know that from children who've suffered abuses in their earlier years. They will have more of a negative effect. The words will have a more of a negative effect on their lives than the actual punishment that they receive, the physical punishment. So we need to be mindful of that our actions, our thoughts, our words all have an effect, and we need to think of that before we react to what someone else has said, right? Think about the consequence. Now, this one situation, you say, well, it's only between me and the neighbor where I punched in the gut, but if their children are watching, and their children see me hurting their father, for example, and their children start developing this hate of me, or this hate and anger against people like me, basing judgment on the way I look or whatever, thinking it's a cultural thing, or then they'll be building up these hate and prejudices as well, and these fears and these anxieties about not being able to trust the people around them, and they'll raise their children with that, and they will, and it will go on and on and on. So it can have a really disastrous effect just from one action. It can go on and on and on, rippling through lifetimes if we're not careful. So that's a poor example probably, but it is an example of karma, what happens. Now, it's not the universe that pays me back with this awful feeling I have in my gut after I'm consumed with anger and hate and a need for vengeance. It is my mind. It's my mind and my reactivity that's creating this unease and this sense of suffering in me, okay, which I projected out onto somebody else, feeding them with more suffering. So that is karma. And maybe this is what this person's talking about, at the end of a lifetime, they've punched a lot of people in the gut because they offended them, or they hurt a lot of people, or said a lot of mean things to people, or thought a lot of bad thoughts about people. How do they fix that at the end of their lives? How do they change that karma around? In fear that if they do believe in reincarnation, they'll come back in another incarnation and have to relive this lesson all over again. The other thing that this person asked, they refer to karma, but they also refer to sin. And what sin is we tend to see it a lot in Western religious thought, maybe more so than Eastern religious thought. And sin is wrongdoing against God, basically, against, the Ten Commandments if you're Christian, or some of the other things if you're Muslim or Jewish. So we are looking at sin as something that is highly punishable by God, I guess is a good way of looking at that. We have to look at that word sin, though, and think of where it actually came from. Again, it is just a word. It came from a Hebrew word, because the Bible, of course, is originally translated into Greek and Hebrew, ancient Hebrew. And it was an ancient Hebrew word that meant to miss the mark. To miss the mark. Meaning what you were aiming at, you did not hit. That's all it meant. But we've taken it in our Christian society and built it up to be something that it isn't. So, sin is just that. It's just action, thought, or words that have missed the mark. They have not led us to that higher awareness, to that clarity, to that place of altruistic goodness where we want to be. Does that make sense? Okay. So how do we accomplish that before we die? Well, we become aware of the things we're saying and the things we're doing and the things we're thinking right here and right now. And we commit to being more wholesome and more skillful in our thinking and our doing and our speaking. And we ask for forgiveness. We take ownership and accountability for the things we've done, thought, and said that were unwholesome and skillful. We ask forgiveness. We try to make amends. Not that the person will forgive us, but we asked for that forgiveness. We're truly sorry and apologetic. And then we also forgive ourselves for being human, for being in a frame of mind and unconsciousness where we were not yet evolved to the point where we were realizing the consequences of our actions, the karma of our actions. We can't change the past. There's no way we can go back and fix what we've done, but we can here and now strive to make amends and then to proceed in a more wholesome and skillful way. That's how we, I believe, and what do I know, neutralize our karma. And what did it say? Make up for sins before we die. Well, that's all I have to say. Not sure if it makes a lot of sense. Namaste.